Tobias watched her from across the concrete lane. Just another slow Saturday at the range. Or so he thought. The others barely glanced at her, the only black woman in the room, standing silent at booth 7 with rental gear too big for her hands. Her posture was strange, too still, like the air around her had forgotten how to move. No instructor, no eye contact, no introduction. Just a quiet presence that didn't belong, and yet somehow demanded to be seen. You felt it, didn't you? That chill, like something had slipped through. Like the moment you clicked this video, you stepped into a file that should have been sealed, forgotten. But you opened it. And now, you're here. Alone with the truth. They ignored her. Not out of malice, but out of habit. Tobias knew the way the regulars whispered, how they dismissed newcomers with polite neglect. No one offered her guidance. No one asked her name. She didn't flinch at the thunder of nearby gunshots. She didn't look up. She just loaded a single round into the rusted .308 bolt-action rifle the way a person might reload a memory. Slow, exact, with something buried beneath it. A quiet hum began under her breath, barely a tune, almost like an echo trying to remember itself. That's when the man beside her, a state champion, some war vet who shot competitively for years, turned, to say something, maybe a joke, maybe a warning. But he stopped mid-sentence, his mouth frozen, his skin pale like he'd seen something through her. Not behind her. Through her. And then, he whispered 4 words. No one else heard them. He stepped back, trembling, and vanished. Gone. In front. 15 witnesses and 5 security cameras. Vanished. No sound, no trace. Just the weight of that whisper hanging in the space he left behind. Thick as grief, sharp as broken time. She didn't react. She adjusted the rifle like she hadn't, noticed the man disappear at all, and then, with a calm breath that didn't belong in this world, she fired. The sound wasn't a shot. It was a rupture. The bullet hit the distant target, one no one had ever touched before, and snapped the record once held by the very man who now no longer existed. It wasn't just the score that was shattered. The cameras all glitched the moment the trigger pulled as if reality blinked. But that's not even the part that kept Tobias up at night. It was what he found later. The footage. Frame by frame. The bullet moved. Wrong. It curved, but not like physics would allow. It reacted to something watching it, like it knew, and her eyes, paused just before recoil, were black. Not void, not shadow, but filled with movement, like hundreds of faces pressed against glass waiting to be let through. He tried to report it, tried to upload it, but each time the file corrupted. Now he's gone too. And the range, it's closed. No official story, no press, no records of that day, only whispers. But you clicked. You saw the first few seconds. That means you were meant to, because someone, somewhere, just uploaded another clip, and in this one, she speaks. The moment she spoke, the room shifted, or maybe it was Tobias who shifted. You have to understand, the clip wasn't just a recording, it was a crack. The sound bent, a low hum behind the whisper, like static stretching thin and tearing at the edges of something you can't quite hold. The words didn't come through clean. Instead, they frayed. Snippets lost, like memories slipping from a dream just as you try to pin them down. Tobias rewound and replayed the fragment dozens of times, each pass feeding more unease than clarity. The voice was hers, but something else crawled beneath it, like an undercurrent pulling the meaning away from him. It wasn't just what she said, it was what he couldn't hear, the spaces in between the syllables where something urgent tried to break free but got swallowed whole. That's when the first doubt crept in. Was this real, or was it a signal from a fractured mind? Tobias began to question what he remembered, or thought he did. At first, it was little things, a missing word from a conversation, a detail that shifted between memories, a name that was there one moment and nowhere the next. His friends started to look at him sideways, like they were watching a man losing his grip, maybe even losing himself. but Tobias swore the footage existed. It had to exist. Except every place he checked, the archives, the cloud, even his personal hard drive, the file was corrupted beyond recognition, overwritten, or just gone. And then the audio started to glitch. At first it was subtle, a crackle behind his phone calls, faint echoes behind the news broadcasts, static in the silence. But soon the glitches grew louder, disrupting his thoughts, invading the quiet moments when he wasn't looking. He caught himself repeating phrases from the clip in his head, over and over, until they lost meaning. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, he swore he heard her voice whispering from the speakers on his TV. But when he turned it on, there was nothing but the news. Always the same stories about missing persons, cold cases, something dark lurking under the surface of the city he thought he knew. That's when he met her. Her name was Dana, a woman with dark eyes that seemed too knowing, too sharp for the late hour at the coffee shop where they crossed paths. She said she had seen the footage too, or at least something like it, but she wasn't like Tobias. She wanted to believe it was supernatural. She talked about the veil thinning, about truths hidden in plain sight, and she pulled out her phone to show him clips that shouldn't exist. Blurred faces, voices speaking in languages that twisted the tongue, symbols flashing too. Best to read. Yet even as Dana shared these horrors, there was something off about her. Her stories shifted depending on the question, her eyes darting like she was dodging something, or someone. One moment she claimed to be a researcher, digging for real answers behind what no one tells you. The next, she admitted to hallucinations, voices she couldn't shut off, memories that weren't hers. Tobias found himself wondering, was she the key or just another ghost tangled in the web? Was she a reliable witness or a symptom of the same madness that gnawed at him? Every time. Tobias looked deeper, the line blurred more. Was this footage a fragment of a hidden conspiracy? A real, unsolved mystery someone buried deep? Or was it a manifestation of his own unraveling, a mind cracking under the weight of trauma he refused to face? His memories of that day fragmented. Sometimes, the champion vanished. Sometimes he was just there, confused but alive. Sometimes the black woman's eyes were normal. Other times they were pools of darkness that swallowed the light. The uncertainty clawed at him, twisting reality until it was impossible to tell what was true. And yet the fear stayed, quiet but relentless, growing in the space between what was said and what was left unsaid, in the static before the whisper, in the shadows behind the shot. Tobias knew one thing for certain. Whatever this was, whatever it meant, it wasn't done with him yet. Because in the back of his mind, just beyond reach, there was a name she never said. But someone was desperate to keep buried. Tobias sat back, the cold glow of his laptop screen casting flickering shadows over his face as he finally stared down the tangled threads of what had haunted him for weeks. The missing files, the glitches, the whispers, everything was starting to line up, like a puzzle falling into place after years shoved into the dark. He had stumbled upon a hidden archive buried beneath layers of encrypted data, a shadow repository no one was supposed to know existed. There, nestled among discarded surveillance footage and half-erased recordings, was a clip that didn't glitch, didn't distort, and didn't corrupt. Clear, sharp. Her voice was there, calm and unmistakable, speaking the words he'd only heard in fragments before. The mystery was unraveling. The truth, he thought, was finally within reach. He watched as the champion's disappearance played out again in full. The sudden step back, the look of horror, and then the inexplicable vanishing act. But this time, something new appeared. Just, for a blink, on the edge of the frame. A figure standing far behind the shooters, too still to be noticed at first, barely visible, cloaked in shadows so thick they seemed to swallow the light itself. It watched, not like a person, not like a presence that belonged, but like a weight pressing down on the whole scene. Tobias felt a shiver crawl up his spine. It was as if this thing had been the reason all along. The archive was a trove of forgotten history, too. As Tobias dug, He found a disturbing pattern buried beneath the surface. Old news reports, missing persons, strange disappearances dating back decades, all linked to shooting ranges, places of competition and control. One story twisted itself around his mind with a sick familiarity. In 1978, a young black woman named Evelyn James had disappeared during a small-town marksmanship contest in Missouri. A case swept under the rug with whispers of mental breakdown and hallucination. Witnesses described her as calm, almost detached, her gaze empty and far away, before she vanished mid-competition without a trace, leaving only a cold silence behind. Something about Evelyn's case echoed Tobias's nightmare so precisely, it felt less like coincidence, and more like a memory half-remembered. The way the champion had vanished, the way the black woman held herself, the strange voice no one else heard. Was it possible this wasn't the first time? Was the past bleeding into the present? He felt the walls closing in, his breath shortening. The hidden truth wasn't just a secret buried in data. It was a wound reopening in time, one he was only beginning to understand. But then came the moment that shattered everything. Tobias's fingers trembled as he zoomed in on the shadowed figure watching from the distance. At first it was just a dark blur, but then a detail emerged. A badge gleaming faintly beneath the low light. A police insignia. A man, or something masquerading as one. Tobias's heart sank. The figure had been there all along, silently overseeing, not just observing but orchestrating. The implication was unbearable. It wasn't some ghost or supernatural. Of course, it was a calculated presence, a force manipulating memories, erasing evidence, hiding behind the authority no one questioned. Tobias closed his eyes, memories flooding back unbidden, moments he'd forgotten or pushed away. Childhood afternoons spent at his grandfather's old shooting range, the heavy weight of silence after a stray bullet narrowly missed him. The old man's nervous glances when Tobias asked about the ones who disappeared. There were gaps in those memories, places where time seemed to thin, and the faces he trusted shifted in the shadows. Was it possible he'd been living this without realizing? A memory glitch so deep it blurred reality and fiction, fear and truth. He opened, his eyes again, the screen now distorted, the lines of code twisting as if alive. The video, the story, everything was a trap, designed to draw him in, to pull him under. The person who had vanished was no victim but a warning. The champion wasn't just a competitor but a marker, a boundary in a game far darker than anyone dared speak of. And that watcher, the hidden force, was not only observing but feeding, thriving on the fractures in his mind, the fear that gripped his soul. Tobias tried to steady his breathing, but a cold realization took hold. The story he thought he had uncovered was only the surface, a false resolution crafted to keep the truth locked away. The clues, the files, even Dana's warnings, they were pieces of a larger design meant to unsettle, to disorient, to convince him he was losing his grip on reality. You're not crazy, they lied to you. The mystery wasn't just uncovered, it was being rewritten right in front of him. And then, the clip repeated itself on screen. But this time, as the shot echoed through the range, the champion's face twisted, not in fear but in recognition. His eyes met Tobias's through the screen, and with a slow, impossible clarity, he mouthed a single word that shattered everything. Remember. The screen went black. The story you thought you knew. It's time to watch again. Because the real nightmare has only just begun. There are others. Tobias learned this when the boundaries of his own reality began to blur beyond his solitary obsession. When the silence that had once engulfed him suddenly cracked beneath the weight of whispers in the dark. It wasn't just his mind unraveling. There were eyes watching him, and others like him. People tethered by the same thread of fractured memories and lost truths, all scattered in quiet corners of the country. They had been silently observing the unfolding story, not as casual bystanders but as unwilling participants caught in a shadow web spun decades ago. threads stretching far beyond anything Tobias could have imagined. The thing about them, was that no one talked openly, and even fewer dared to acknowledge the pattern that linked their stories. But Tobias started to find signs, subtle and chilling, almost impossible to notice unless you were looking for them, and he realized these signs were not accidental. They were invitations, cryptic messages left as if to say, "You were right all along." At first, the messages appeared in the most ordinary places: a flash of a symbol etched briefly on a cracked sidewalk, a sticker plastered across a forgotten lamppost, a pattern of flickering streetlights that seemed to pulse in a rhythm too deliberate to be random. Tobias saw the same symbol cropping up in the margins of the footage he'd recovered, the corners of frames where no one else seemed to look, but now he could not unsee it. A strange angular mark like a broken hourglass, fractured yet infinite. It appeared in found footage from 20 years ago, in videos government never released, in whispers between static bursts on late-night broadcasts. Sometimes, late at night when sleep failed him, Tobias would catch fragments of a dream. Dark corridors, lined with mirrors reflecting faces he didn't recognize but felt intimately familiar with. A voice calling a name he'd never heard aloud, and then that symbol glowing softly at the edges of his vision before the dream dissolved into suffocating silence. The messages weren't just signs, they were a secret code, a shared language for a group that had no way to meet but still needed to communicate, to warn each other about the unseen force tightening its grip. Then there was the third perspective. It came unbidden, like a shiver crawling across the spine of Tobias's consciousness, a presence that seemed to exist outside of time and place, both observer and participant, the only one telling a truth untainted by fear or deception. This observer spoke not in words but in fleeting images, brief intrusions that felt like memories not quite your own. A hand slipping a note under a door, a flickering surveillance camera caught in a loop, a cold breeze sweeping through a deserted stadium. Tobias wasn't sure if this perspective was part of the same network or something altogether different, something older and far more dangerous, but it was undeniably real, and more importantly, it was aware. It acknowledged the fractures in Tobias's mind, the gaps in his memory, the deep-rooted paranoia that now colored every waking moment. The observer's presence was a constant reminder that control was an illusion, that identity itself was fragile, malleable, and vulnerable to forces beyond comprehension. The more Tobias uncovered, the less he understood who he was, or if he had ever truly understood. Memories he once trusted began to dissolve, replaced by fragments that didn't fit, by feelings of déjà vu that twisted into dread. Were these memories his own, or implanted? Were the choices he thought he had made really his, or just echoes of some larger design? The sinister rhythm of the mystery pulsed through his veins, a reminder that the line between self and other, between reality and manipulation, was thinner than the faintest whisper. Each new discovery was a double-edged sword, revealing a glimpse of the hidden truth, but also pulling him deeper into a labyrinth of doubt and fear, where the very notion of free will seemed like a cruel joke. And the watchers, they were always there. Invisible, intangible, their motives inscrutable yet undeniably malignant. They didn't need to reveal themselves fully. Their power lay in the pervasive uncertainty, in the feeling that every step forward might be another move on a chessboard. They controlled. The watchers manipulated memories, planted false leads, and rewrote histories to keep the truth locked away where only the brave, or the broken, might glimpse it. Tobias realized that the vanished champion, the whispered names, the shadowed figures weren't isolated anomalies but markers in a sprawling network of control and erasure, designed to keep secrets buried beneath layers of time and silence. As Tobias sat alone in the dim light, staring at the tangled web of clues, symbols, and half-remembered dreams, a new message flickered across his screen. No words, just the symbol, the broken hourglass pulsing steadily like a heartbeat, and beneath it an untraceable file began to download. Tobias's breath hitched, the air thick with anticipation and fear. Whatever lay inside that file promised answers, or maybe more questions, but one thing was clear. The story wasn't just his anymore. It belonged to all of them, the watchers, the observed, the forgotten. It belonged to anyone willing to confront the fractures in their mind and the shadows lurking just beyond the light. And as the download bar crept toward completion, Tobias understood something that chilled him deeper than any revelation before. The past wasn't done with him. The watchers had been here from the start, their presence woven into every memory, every doubt, every whisper of truth. There was no escaping them, not really, because this was more than a mystery uncovered or a memory glitch exposed. This was a reckoning with the invisible forces shaping everything we think we know about who we are, what we remember, and how deeply we can ever truly trust ourselves. The screen flickered again, and for a brief moment Tobias saw it, not just the symbol but a face staring back, eyes wide with warning, lips moving silently in a wordless plea. Then the screen went black. The story you thought you were watching? It's only the beginning. Now the question isn't just what is real, it's who is real, and who's been watching you all along. Tobias sat alone in the cold silence of his dimly lit apartment, the weight of everything pressing down like a stone carved from the darkest corners of his soul. The screen before him remained black, but, in that darkness, a storm raged. A storm of memory, fear, and something deeper, something ancient. This wasn't about the vanished champion, the whispered symbols, or even the shadowy watchers anymore. No, the mystery had peeled itself away, to reveal something far more raw and human. It was about why all of this had unfolded, why the fractures in memory and the unseen eyes had led him here, to this crucible of truth and doubt. He remembered now, or thought he did. The long nights haunted by faces he couldn't name, the dreams where time folded like a fragile origami, and the way his heart would quicken in moments of silence, like it was listening for something no one else could hear. Tobias's journey wasn't just a quest for answers. It was a desperate search for himself, for the part of his soul buried beneath layers of deception and silence. Because sometimes the greatest mysteries aren't out there in the world. They're inside us, tangled in the shadows of our own making. The truth, when it finally came, felt like a breaking wave, terrifying in its inevitability and cleansing in its brutal honesty. Tobias wasn't just a victim of some clandestine game or hidden conspiracy. He was a choice, a living, breathing paradox of memory and forgetfulness. Control and surrender. The watchers. They weren't faceless puppeteers as he had feared. They were a reflection of something within. Our need to forget, to rewrite, to shield ourselves from pain that is too vast to bear. And in that realization, Tobias found himself at the edge of a precipice. To embrace the truth meant to risk everything. The fragile sense of identity, the illusion of safety, the carefully constructed walls he had built around his mind. To reject it meant to remain a prisoner of the shadows, forever haunted by questions with no answers. The choice wasn't about finding the truth. It was about what the truth would do to him once it was known. Then came the confession, quiet, trembling, like a whisper carried on a cold wind. It wasn't from a mysterious stranger or a cryptic message. It came from Tobias himself, from the part of him that had been buried beneath years of denial and fear. "Maybe I've been hiding not from them," he said softly, voice cracking with the weight of years, "but from myself. The part that knows what really happened but can't face the pain it brings. Maybe the mystery isn't out there. Maybe it's in here." His hand pressed against his chest, over the place where memories burned like embers beneath fragile skin. It was a moment of total vulnerability, an unmasking that left Tobias raw and exposed. And in that exposure, there was something sacred, a recognition that the most terrifying awakenings come not from what the world shows us, but from what we discover within. The watchers, the vanished champions, the symbols etched in forgotten places, they were all echoes of the human need to understand, to connect, to survive the unbearable weight of existence. The screen flickered once more, and for a fleeting moment Tobias saw not a face of fear or mystery, but one of quiet hope. Not a resolution, but an invitation. To keep searching, to keep questioning, to keep waking up from dreams that never felt quite like his own. The story wasn't ending, it was becoming something more, something alive, something that demanded courage, compassion, and an unflinching gaze into the abyss of what it means to be human. As Tobias leaned back, breath slow and steady, the room seemed to breathe with him, filled with the unspoken promise that this was only the beginning. The mystery would never fully unravel, and maybe it shouldn't, because some truths are not meant to set us free. They're meant to remind us who we really are beneath the illusions, the fear, and the silence. And as the screen faded to black, the final words whispered softly, hauntingly, like a secret carried on the wind to anyone willing to listen. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for stories you were never meant to hear. Until next time. Remember, some truths don't want to be found.